It is the largest sportswear company on the planet. $46 billion a year, 78,000 employees. Its products are on feet in almost every country on Earth. And it owns, essentially, no factories. It does not make its own shoes. It doesn't spin the thread, mold the soles, or stitch the uppers. Almost everything you associate with this company, the making of the actual thing, happens in buildings it does not own, run by companies you've never heard of. So what exactly is Nike? This is how a company that makes almost nothing became worth almost everything. Start with what it began as. In 1964, a University of Oregon track coach named Bill Bowerman and one of his former runners, Phil Knight, went into business, importing running shoes from Japan and selling them out of the boot of a car at track meets. They called it Blue Ribbon Sports. Bowerman tinkered obsessively with the shoes themselves, famously pouring rubber into his family's waffle iron to invent a new kind of sole. In 1971, they struck out on their own brand and renamed the company after the Greek goddess of victory, Nike. And they commissioned a logo, a single, simple check mark, from a design student for $35. Today, that company sits on a sprawling campus near Beaverton, Oregon, employs around 78,000 people directly, and owns 3 brands: Nike itself, the Jordan brand, and Converse. But here's the thing to hold on to. Almost none of those 78,000 people make shoes. They design, they market, they manage. Nike, at its core, is not a manufacturer. It is a design and marketing company that orchestrates other people's factories. To understand it, you have to understand the factory that isn't there. Nike does not own the factories that make its products. Instead, it contracts them out to more than 700 independent factories in dozens of countries, employing well over 1 million workers. The overwhelming majority are in just 3 countries: Vietnam, Indonesia, and China. Here's the division of labor. Nike, in Oregon, does the design, the material science, the branding, and the ordering. It writes the specifications down to the millimeter, then places an order with a contract manufacturer who buys the machines, hires the workers, and actually builds the shoe. Nike buys the finished product and ships it onward. This is what business people call an asset-light model. You own the valuable, high-margin parts, the ideas, the brand, the customer, and you rent the expensive, low-margin part, the making. It keeps Nike flexible and hugely profitable, but it has a shadow side. In the 1990s, Nike was engulfed in scandal over conditions in those contractor factories. The word sweatshop attached itself to the brand for a decade. Nike's response reshaped the whole industry. A supplier code of conduct, factory audits, and public lists of every factory it uses. The lesson it learned the hard way. When you don't own the factory, you still own the blame. So if it isn't organized around factories, how is Nike organized? The answer is a matrix. The company slices itself 3 different ways at the same time. Slice it by product, and you get 3 buckets. Footwear, which is roughly 2/3 of all sales. Apparel, about 1/4. And equipment, the balls, bags, and bottles, a small sliver. Slice it by geography, and Nike reports in 4 regions. North America, its biggest, then Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, then Greater China, and finally, Asia-Pacific and Latin America. But the 3rd slice is the one that really runs the company. Consumer categories: running, basketball, football, training, sportswear. Nike organizes its designers and marketers around the person playing the sport, not the country they live in. In 2017, it bet the entire company on this idea. In a reorganization it called the Consumer Direct Offense, pulling power away from geographic managers and handing it to the categories and to digital. At the top sits a chief executive, today a company veteran named Elliott Hill. But the single most important figure remains the co-founder, Phil Knight, who, as chairman emeritus, still personally owns around 17% of the entire company. Nike is not one brand. It's a house of them. The core Nike brand is the giant, but inside it lives the Jordan brand, which began in 1984 as a single endorsement deal with one basketball rookie and grew into a multi-billion-dollar business in its own right, a rare case of one athlete's name becoming a global label. Then there's Converse, the century-old maker of canvas basketball shoes, which Nike bought in 2003 for around $300 million and runs as a semi-independent subsidiary. What's just as revealing is what Nike got rid of. Over the years, it bought, then deliberately sold off, a whole shelf of other brands: dress shoes, a football kit maker, a surfwear label, ice hockey gear. The strategy was subtraction. Shed the distractions and pour everything back into the core. A focused house beats a crowded one. Finally, how does a shoe actually reach you? Nike sells two ways. The old way is wholesale. Nike sells its products to other retailers, the shops and department stores, who sell them on to you. The new way is direct. Nike sells to you itself, through its own stores, its own website, and above all, its own apps. For most of the last decade, Nike chased the direct model with something close to religious zeal. It cut ties with hundreds of wholesale partners, walked away from selling on Amazon in 2019, and pushed customers relentlessly toward its own apps and membership. The goal was to own the customer relationship completely, and it worked. For a while, direct sales climbed past 40% of the company's revenue. But then came the whiplash. By 2024 and 2025, Nike's digital sales were falling sharply, and the shelves it had abandoned had been filled by rivals. The new chief executive's first big move was a reversal. Rebuild the wholesale partnerships Nike had spent years cutting. It turns out that even a $46 billion giant cannot fully dictate how it reaches the world. So, that is Nike, a company that makes almost nothing itself, yet controls nearly everything that matters. It rents the world's factories, slices itself three ways at once, houses a family of brands, and fights a constant battle over the last few feet between its products and your feet. Its most valuable possession isn't a machine or a building or even a shoe. It's an idea, a name borrowed from a goddess of victory, and a promise stamped onto things made by other people's hands. Own the design, own the story, own the customer. Let someone else own the factory. That is the machine behind the shoe.